I had a lot of different kinds of clients. We worked with Freightliner, we worked with Boise Cascade, we worked with a slew of high-tech companies, including Tektronix. So I hung up my shit. And one day my phone rang. It was Phil, an engineer that I'd worked with at Tektronix. He said, "Would you do me a favor?" "Sure, what?" He said, "Would you have lunch with me and help me convince Jeff not to start this business he's talking about?" "Sure." So we met in a little hamburger joint. And as he told me about this business, I listened, and I tried to learn as much as I could. And what I figured was that, well, I had to be truthful. So I told him, I said, "Jeff, you cannot build this business you're talking about. Advertising will not get you enough clients. It will not get you enough money to keep it going." He said, "I want to do it anyway." So I said to him, I said, "Okay, look, what I'll do is I'll help you write the best ad you could ever get for this business. I'll help you place it in the publication that will get to the most people that could possibly give you the business. But we'll make a bet here." I said, "Jeff, here's the bet. If you get more than 5 people to come into this business and get what you're trying to offer them, I will take you and your wife to the best restaurant of your selection in the city of Portland. But if you get less than 5, you are going to take me back to lunch here at this cheeseburger place." He thought that was a pretty good deal. 2 months later, my phone rang. "I owe you a lunch." So we went to lunch, and Phil joined us again. While we're having lunch, Jeff casually said to me, he said, "You know, I'm working on something in the garage. Would you like to see it?" "Sure. What have I got to lose?" So we went to that dirt-floored garage. And I listened, and I learned, and I understood what he was trying to do. And later that afternoon when I got home, I said to my wife, "I have just seen the next thing like Xerox." She told me I was nuts. Not an unusual circumstance. But I went to work with him. I negotiated a deal whereby I would get paid my fees. Some people say they're unreasonable, but that's not true. I would get paid my fees, but I would also get stock. A few years later, the company went public. In the interim, I taught the cadre that we assembled how to network. And we generated $500,000 in startup funding in 17 days. We figured out what to name the company to help do that. The name of the company was Digimark. I was in Chicago when they went public. I had a $4 million morning. I'll say that again, a $4 million morning. Now that's the way you build a consultancy. Let me give you the real moral to this story. It's really pretty simple. You have to build relationships. The people that I knew from working at Tektronix, I never broke up those relationships. I never walked away from them. I answered the phone. I kept in touch. I found out what was going on. And when they needed somebody to help them with my expertise, they called me. And I went to work and I added additional expertise. And I worked with them over time. Okay? You have to build any consultancy on 2 very simple things. Candor and integrity. You have to get to trust. What you know matters. Who you know matters. But the single most important thing to build your consultancy is who trusts you.
You all need to say one word several times, and that word is no. No. So let's try it. No. Okay. You've been out networking, and there's a banker who you've been networking with, and he calls you up and he says, "Rick, I got a client that needs your help. His company's got this problem. I've told him that you can solve it. I've got an appointment with us at 3 o'clock Thursday afternoon. Can you come?" You say yes. Okay? go in the office, he introduces you, you see him, and you begin to establish rapport. Have you presented a proposal yet?
No.
So you establish that rapport and you begin to ask him some questions about his company, about the issue that the banker told you about, and you get some information from him. Have you presented a proposal yet?
No.
Then you ask him a critical question. You ask him the question, if we come to an arrangement, can you authorize a check to pay my services? And he says, yes, I'm the CEO of the company. I can authorize the check. What's he called?
The decision.
He's called an economic buyer. You have to be talking to an economic buyer. If you're not talking to an economic buyer, will you need to submit a proposal? Yes. If you're talking to the economic buyer, you'll find out in just a minute. But now you know he can write you a check. Have you written a proposal?
No.
So you begin to then go through his problem and you begin to lay out a strategy of how you can solve that problem. And you demonstrate to him that you have the skills and the abilities to do so through case studies, war stories, testimonials, and those kinds of things. Have you presented a proposal yet?
No.
And you ask him another secret question. Do you have any budget for this project? Does it matter? You're talking to the CEO, who's the economic buyer. Does it matter what his answer is?
Yes.
No. No.
There isn't a budget?
Budget is simply a means to allocate money.
He already told you he can write you a check.
He's already told you he can write you a check. Okay. Now you start to ask him the questions. What is this problem doing to your company? If I could bring in a solution, and this is a long thing, too long for tonight, but if I could bring you a solution, what's the benefit going to be to you? If we can reduce your inventory $2 million, what's that worth to you? If we can increase your sales 20%, what's that worth to you? Okay? And he tells you, well, we can increase sales 20%. We can reduce our costs by 15%. We can improve our inventory turns by double. Whatever it might be. And you're sitting there beginning to calculate in your mind. Have you presented a proposal yet?
No.
So you come back to him and say, I think I can do this project and solve your problem based on all of our discussions, and it will cost about X. Does that seem reasonable to you? And in your mind, you've already calculated that that's a 10 to 1 ROI, or better. And he goes, wow, if you could do that, you know, based on my numbers as the CEO, based on my numbers and saving of this, 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 and this, if you're only going to charge me that and you're going to fix all this, that's great. And have you presented a proposal yet?
No.
You say, okay, I will be here next Tuesday to begin my interviews. Is that acceptable to you? And he says, yes. Have you presented a proposal yet?
No.
As you walk out, you say, I will send you an engagement letter documenting everything we just discussed. You get home, do the engagement letter, you stick it in a FedEx envelope, because this is an important big project, and send it to him. Have you presented a proposal?
My name is Michael Curry, and I'm a business information systems consultant, an e-business consultant I like to call myself. And I help companies identify innovative solutions using information technology to improve their processes. And I focus heavily on a high ROI. And so a lot of times when I'm presenting solutions to customers, you know, there's a lot of people involved, sometimes very technical people that are involved. As Rick pointed out, none of them are decision makers. They only have the power to say no. So the trick is you got to get past these people and ultimately get to the decision maker. But it's important as you go through that to establish your credibility with them and make sure that you can do the project that you have to do. So I've gone through the whole gambit in this. When I first started my practice about 10 years ago, I had a 9-page boilerplate contract, ironclad, that I would go through the process Rick just talked about, trying to close the sale. Certainly wasn't that eloquent, though. And then I would hand him this 9-page contract in that FedEx envelope, or however it was I sent it. I send most of my stuff by email, though, I will say. And try to get them to sign that. And unfortunately, I lost a lot of deals at that point, because as soon as they saw this 9-page legal contract, they immediately thought, I need to get my attorney involved in this. And so I did that for about 2 years. I worked through a few of them, and then finally, I just finally said, I got fed up with it, and so I went to the complete opposite direction. And I did nothing but a handshake. And unfortunately, it's difficult sometimes to cut the tether with the customer, where the customer is paid for a certain amount. You've provided 150% of what they asked for, but they are still wanting more and expecting more and demanding more. So ultimately what I found was, for my own sanity, for my own peace of mind, for my own safety, if you will, in business, I had to have something, some sort of a formal document. So what I've provided is a little example of that for you. In my opinion, is the best way to avoid any difficulties. If you get a subordinate who then says, what's the deal here? Why is this going like this? And I've had that happen before. One time an assistant was replaced, and the new assistant came in, and I had been primarily dealing with the old assistant, and the new assistant had a new way of thinking that was not consistent with any of my policies or any of the things that I'd ever agreed to do. And she began to take me to task for these things because I wasn't meeting her expectations. And ultimately, they're no longer my customer anymore, and we parted friendly on good, positive terms, because I never ever want to end a relationship in a bad, and I will always be the consummate professional when I try to do that. I have a little clause in here that basically says that, I want to ask you to be a referral, but I ask that if you would ever be so inclined to say anything negative, that you will give me the opportunity to try and make that right. Now, is any of this legal? Is it any of this gonna work in court? You know what? Like a lot of people, I'm not interested in going to court. And to be honest, when I showed my attorney, he had a conniption fit over it. Okay, and tried to rewrite it all in boilerplate. And I said, no, thank you. And so I have found, basically, by having this, that a lot of people, it helps, because when I need to go back to it and talk about the specifics of it, that there is at least a reference point that we can go from. Now, where we may go, if I say in here that I provide 100% support and fixes for 30 days, do I fall on my sword on that if they call me on the 45th day and say, hey, I really need this thing fixed right here? Do I then try to send them an invoice for it? Absolutely not. But what it does is it keeps the customer who's calling me 6 months later going, hey, can you make one more modification to my logo, please? Because now we want to add this to the bottom of that. It allows me to just say, we've kind of gone past that amount of time, and I really need to draw a line in the sand, but I would absolutely love to do this for you. How about we add this onto that other project that we were talking about and move on to the next phase of our relationship? So again, I hope that you find this helpful. You need to tailor it to your own practice, to the things that are important to you, to the policies that are important, the things that get you in trouble. This is a living document. I think that when you go to an attorney and ask an attorney to write it, he's trying to write it one time to cover every possible situation, and it's not going to work for you. And what you need to do is you need to take ownership of that document, and you need to convert it into something that works for you and that is going to address the little things in your process along the way. And I've made modifications to mine over time. Okay, one time I had somebody try to take me to task in another state. So since then I added a little note in here that I'm an Oregon company. And I expect that any differences that we might have would be settled in Oregon, because they wanted me to get on a plane and fly out to Denver to discuss it. And I felt like that they should reimburse me for it if we were going to do that, and they didn't. Anyways, my bottom line I want to leave you with is stay out of court, stay away from the attorneys. We were just talking about that over here. They love to fight, they love to argue. If you get in front of them, God help you. Thank you.